This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rada back again with episode 63 of A Geek Leader, and today on the show I've got Dave Bittner. Dave Bittner is the host of the Cyberwire Podcast, Hacking Humans, producer of Recorded Future. He also makes security appearances on Grumpy Old Geeks podcast, and we talked about how he got started in technology and his journey through entrepreneurship and beginning a company, and then how he got over and involved with the Cyberwire. And then we talk about some of the things that tech leaders need to know about when it comes to cybersecurity and staying involved and up to date and up to speed. And he has just lots of good advice, and I really appreciated having Dave on the show. I thought he gave us a little bit of change of pace of some of the people we've had on, and also gives us a really good perspective of things that we can learn about and stay focused with when it comes to entrepreneurship, leadership, and the technical security. So give it up for Dave Bittner. So today I have Dave Bittner on the show, and Dave is the host of the Cyberwire podcast. He also makes appearances on Grumpy Old Geeks and a couple of other shows. Dave, if you could tell the audience just a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started on the podcast and in cybersecurity.
Well, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I started out, I guess my journey in tech started when I was a kid, and I went to a summer camp that was a computer camp. I had a science teacher who saw that maybe this would be something I'd be interested in, so he recommended me to go to this special program over the summer, and that put me right down in the middle of a room full of TRS-80 computers, which I know is dating myself, but I was hooked, and from then on, I saved up some money from, I had a paper route, which again is dating me. I saved up some money, bought myself a computer and learned to program, and started exploring things like bulletin board systems and, how the phone system of the United States and the rest of the world works. And then continued that, went off to high school and then college. I actually studied broadcasting in college. I was a radio, television, and film major. Came out of college, started my own business along with my wife. For 20 years, we had a company called Pixel Workshop, and which my wife still runs. And we were doing video and multimedia. We were really on the leading edge of that desktop video revolution. We saw an opportunity there with some of the innovations that were coming out with combination of Macintosh computers and some of the hardware you could put in them, where all of a sudden you could build a video editing and multimedia production suite for a fraction of what it used to cost to do that. So we jumped on that opportunity right out of college and built that company, ran it for 20 years. And then a few years ago, probably about 4 years ago now, one of my clients from Pixel Workshop lured me away, poached me from my own company with the promise of things like really, really good benefits. And that's where I started in with cybersecurity. Now, I'd always kept up with tech, but I by no means was I a cybersecurity expert. I certainly knew probably more than your average person does, just because I was active with computers and kept up with tech and that sort of thing. But my first few months were really learning all about cybersecurity. And I was on a design and communications team with a cybersecurity company called CyberPoint in Baltimore. Our team got spun off to become the Cyberwire, which is what we are now. And so today we publish the Cyberwire Daily News Brief, which comes out every day. You can get it on our website or via email. And then I host and produce the Cyberwire Podcast, which comes out every day. And then in addition to that, I host our Research Saturday show, where we talk to folks in cybersecurity about the research they've been doing. I host Hacking Humans with Joe Kerrigan from Johns Hopkins University. That's a weekly show about social engineering. We produce a show for an outside company, Recorded Future. That's a threat intelligence company. And we produce their show that comes out weekly. And then I do a weekly guest spot on the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast. We do about 20 minutes worth of security talk every week on that show. So I am doing 9 shows a week, which
is
a lot.
That is incredible.
But it's fun. I enjoy it. It really brings together a lot of the skills. I've been doing. I was a theater kid, so And I've been doing voiceover work since I was, 8 years old or so. So it really brings together a lot of things I've been doing all of my life, my interest in tech, my interest in public speaking and being a performer. It all comes together, and it's been really gratifying. It seems like people are really enjoying the work that we're doing at the Cyberwire. They find it valuable, so it's a nice feeling to know that you're helping people with their jobs and trying to help keep the world a little bit safer. So that's my story.
That's a great story, and I've been listening to the Cyberwire for at least 2 years now, I would say, and I catch Hacking Humans as well. I want to talk a little bit about your, co-owning and founding a business and kind of running that. What was that like? What was the stress levels like, and what was being the one guy that everybody would call, or the couple that everybody would call whenever there was a problem, or what was it like to get new business, knowing that this is your basically the way you provide for your family?
Well, it was certainly an interesting journey, and it had its ups and downs. It is a bit of a roller coaster, for sure. I mean, we were lucky enough to do it for 20 years together, and like I said, my wife is still running the business, so it's still running successfully. Without me, she'd probably say it's better without me. But but you're right. I mean, it's. I think part of it is, we jumped right into this right out of college, about a year or two after college, with another partner, someone who we went to college with. We ended up buying that person out. So I think part of it is we jumped into this not knowing what we didn't know. So we had the arrogance that comes from ignorance that, well, we could do this. Why not? Let's start a business. We literally cobbled together our credit cards and some money we'd made doing jobs as freelancers, and gathered together around $50,000, and we were able to invest in this new editing system, and we were off and running. But beyond that, we had built relationships while we were still in college. My wife and I both went to the University of Maryland. We'd been active at the TV studio there, so we had relationships with the Department of Athletics. And so our first big client was them. We were doing highlights videos and traveling with the football and basketball teams, doing coaches shows, those sorts of things. So that was a really nice thing to have getting started. We were in Maryland, so we were close to the federal government. We were able to get some federal government work. But again, a lot of it was networking, people we'd met while we were doing work at University of Maryland, people who had a relationship through them. So as much as the pure technical knowledge, it is really true. You have to get out there. You have to talk to people, let them know what you can do. And, a lot of it, especially when you're first starting out, you don't have a lot to show. So when someone asks you, can you do this? You say, yeah, absolutely, I can do this. And then they go away and you go, oh, crap, how am I going to do that? and hopefully you figure it out and you grow, one client leads to another, and that's how you grow a business. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I know we had our belief was that we paid ourselves last. Mm-hmm. So when we had employees, there were months when money was tight. And so we felt a responsibility to take care of them. And that could be tough sometimes, because there were times when we didn't pay ourselves and money got tight and people are calling and saying, hey, when are you going to pay me? And, as long as you're honest with people, both your employees and your creditors and so forth, people are willing to work with you, and you work with them with good faith, and things tend to work out. So we did that as well.
Yeah, I have a very similar story. I know when I was in college, me and two of my fraternity brothers actually founded a small business doing web development and network support and those kind of things, and web hosting. We were in that for about 7 years before I ended up selling to a competitor and moving on with my career somewhere else. But yeah, I agree. The soft skills and that fear that you get when someone says, hey, can you build this for us? I'll never forget. I had a large furniture manufacturer call us up, and this is in probably 2000 or 2001, and said, hey, I know you guys build websites. Can you build a catalog on a mini CD or DVD that we can put in computers so that they can browse our catalog of things. And, back when computers had CD drives and things.
Right.
And I was like, sure, no problem. We can build that. And as soon as I got off the phone, I looked at one of my partners and said, so how are we going to build that? I was like, I have no clue.
Absolutely.
Let the research begin.
That's right. And I've been there. I've done that many, many times. And most of the time it works out, right? I mean, you figure it out. I honestly don't know that I can recall any time where I had to go back to someone and say, we can't actually do that. I'm sorry. I was wrong. We figured it out. There's no better motivation than to say you were wrong,
right? Or to prevent you saying you're wrong. So
yeah, interesting.
So, what are some of those skills that you think that a leader needs if they wanted to start their own, let's say, software development company or any other small business? What are some of those soft skills that are necessary? You mentioned networking before. What are some others?
Well, I'll answer it in a little different way. I think something that we learned, this is something that my wife really believes in, and I agree with her. She always says that every successful business needs a Walt and they need a Roy. And she's talking about Walt Disney and Roy Disney. And Roy was the business person behind the scenes, making sure that they had financing, that bills were being paid and people were being hired and all that sort of stuff. And Walt was the dreamer out there saying, he was the one who said, yeah, we can absolutely do that. And then he'd go back, and with Roy, they'd have to figure out how to do it. I think one of the challenges, particularly for people in creative sides of things, and I consider things like web development to be creative, is that we tend to not be the folks who enjoy running businesses. That's not why we got into this, right? Most of us didn't say, what I really want to do is run a business. I really enjoy paying bills. I really enjoy negotiating contracts. And there are those people who enjoy that. So there's going to come a point in every business when you either have to partner with from the outset or find the person who that is what they love to do. Because as your business grows, there's going to be more and more of that. And you're going to find yourself being sort of, I found myself being emotionally dragged down by that, because all the creative stuff I loved doing, and I loved working with the clients. I loved collaborating with them. But then there were the jobs that I had to do. And I have to read this contract. I have to, it's time to renegotiate our lease. It's time to, all those sorts of things. So if you can have someone who that's the thing that they get up in the morning and really motivates them, that's going to be a big load off of you on the creative side. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, that actually helps a lot. I was actually talking to someone a few weeks ago, and they mentioned how they merged their company with another company, in part because of those tasks, and knowing that they needed someone that could do the non-creative work that they struggled with, and right. They just found someone that both of them had the same kind of business, yet they had different passions within that business.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And, when my wife and I were running our business together, we were both Walts. And so we got the business part done, but it was painful. And the bigger the business got, the harder it was and the more time it took. So, eventually we were able to hire someone who could really take that side of things. And that's a big load off. And I think a lot of that's a lot easier these days, because so much of that stuff you can outsource now. There are... you can get those kinds of things as a service, the billing and all that. A lot of that wasn't available when we first got started. But again, I would recommend exploring those kinds of things, offloading those kinds of. It's a worthwhile investment to spend money on if you can offload those sorts of things with a trusted provider. Just the emotional energy that you'll get back from that, I think, in my opinion, is well worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think you have to enjoy what you do, and if you're not having fun with it, what's the point of doing it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So when we first started out, you mentioned all the different shows that you're on, all the recording that you're doing, and I'm sure there's a lot of research and prep work that goes into all those shows as well. Mm-hmm. What do you use for time management and scheduling and making sure that you're on top and ready and available for all those things?
Well, I mean, it's tricky. I have a really, really great team that I work with, and they help a lot. I have a producer whose name is Jennifer Iben. She helps keep things straight for me. But time management, particularly as we've added more shows, it's become really critical. And so I'm sitting here looking at my calendar, right now, which for calendaring, I'm just using your regular Microsoft Office 365 suite. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty full. I think I have 15 interviews scheduled this week. So it's a lot because on top of every interview, there's research for all the interviews. And then, of course, I have to schedule time to record the shows and produce the shows and all that sort of stuff. It was a huge lifestyle upgrade for me. I started using a scheduling software called Calendly. And there's a lot of them out there. But again, like we were talking earlier about outsourcing things, what this did was the scheduling process used to be someone would email me and say, hey, I'd love to be a guest on your show. And I'd say, yeah, it's great. We'd love to have you on. And then they'd say, well, I'm available this time. And I'd say, well, I'm not available then. I'm available this time. And so you'd have probably half a dozen emails back and forth of trying to figure out when you're available. Well, with a scheduling tool, I can block out the periods of time when I am available, when I want to be available for interviews. I can limit the number of interviews I'll do in any single day. I can have different kinds of interviews, so I can say I only want to do one 30-minute interview a day, and I can do two 15-minute interviews a day. And I can send out links to all that stuff. It automatically links up with my calendar, and so when I send out an invitation for someone to be on our show, they go to a web portal, and it shows them when I'm available, when they can schedule with me. And so they can choose a time that's good for them. They choose the time. I get an email. It shows up on my calendar. They get sent all the information about everything they need to know, the Skype details, all that sort of stuff. So it really took away all of that back and forth, gave me a tremendous amount of time back, and has really streamlined that side of things. So again, like we said before, being able to outsource something like that, highly recommended. A great investment. I'm a big fan of that sort of tool.
Yeah, I actually found that tool probably 2 months ago. And prior to that, I very rarely did interviews because it was just a scheduling nightmare. I'd rather do a solo show just so I didn't have to schedule back and forth on emails. And when I found that, it just basically it changed this whole podcast for the better. Yeah,
I think so. And I think also it's sort of it in a way, I think it elevates your perception in the minds of the people who are coming to be a guest because they're like, oh, look at this. You have a tool. Wow, this is convenient. This is, you're being respectful of their time. And a lot of our interviews come through PR companies, so which means some of the people we interview have handlers. And so it allows them to do the scheduling. So all of that back and forth, all that wrangling, that's somebody else's problem. I just put it out in the world and I say, this is when I'm available. I have these restrictions on my time. Please choose a time. And away we go. The other great thing is that it automatically puts sort of a backstop on the number of things I can do in any given day. So I'm not overloaded, by being nice, right? By saying, I can squeeze you in. Yeah, okay. And now that said, I do schedule time in every week that is my sort of emergency time that I have in my back pocket if there's somebody who really needs to get on the show today, or I always have some time in my schedule when I can do that, so I have some flexibility. But,
like if there's a cybersecurity event, there's something that goes on, and there's an expert that you can talk to that would really make things better.
Right, absolutely, right, exactly. So, and this is, by the way, this is a process that I've learned over time. I have massaged my availability. I've changed the way I communicate with clients over time, or interview people who want to be interviewed, as I learn what works and what doesn't, what people respond to and what they don't. So and I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out, what are the best ways to give people the information they need, make it easier for them, and that way we'll get the best possible results out of them and make it efficient for everybody.
Yeah, that's good advice. So being that you are, kind of near DC and you see a lot of the politics and things that are going on, what are some things that tech leaders need to know about, that's going on in the community and in the government today that they may not know about?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think when it comes to cybersecurity, in the past year or 18 months, there really has been an awakening at the higher levels when it comes to the importance and seriousness of cybersecurity. So I think what used to be down in the IT department of a company, where the IT company would give everyone a copy of antivirus for their machine. I think over time, as we've seen things like the Target breach, like the Equifax breach, boards of directors have seen that these are serious things that can have a big effect on the bottom line of the company, and that gets their attention. So we've seen more investment in both time and resources into cybersecurity, because I think people see there's a sort of a nonlinear relationship where things can go bad in a hurry when it comes to cybersecurity and computers in general, right? I mean, that's the old joke that if you want to see things go really bad, get a computer. But you can quickly things can spin up quickly and can cost you a lot of money. If suddenly your entire customer account list is available for sale on the dark web, that's a really bad day for you. So so at the board level, people are seeing that they're investing in things, not just security, not just keeping the perimeter secure, but things like threat intelligence, where people are providing you with information about what are people saying about you, what is there information from your company that is showing up for sale on the dark web or on criminal forums. So you have people looking out so you can be proactive rather than reactive. So I think companies have learned that you need a multi-tiered approach to this. Most companies believe that you need good outside partners who specialize in this. You need good response plans. You need to then practice those response plans, because, for example, there's companies who've been hit by ransomware. Their systems get taken over, their computers start being encrypted, and their phone system doesn't work because the ransomware's hit the phone system. So now they can't make any phone calls. Right, the press are trying to call. They're trying to get information. So all these things you need to. It's that old thing in sports. You need to practice like you play. It's one thing to have a written plan in a binder on a shelf, but you really need to take the time to practice that plan to make sure that it's up to date, that it reflects the reality of what's going on in your business, and that everybody knows what their parts are. Because if and when something bad happens. If you've rehearsed it, if you know what to do, your outcome's going to be a lot better.
Yeah. Are there any stories that come up to mind of people that have done it right, that have had an incident, a breach of some sort, but handled it like an extremely, perfect way or a really good way that you can think of?
Well, I was just earlier this week, I was talking with Andy Greenberg, who's a senior writer at Wired. And he just had a piece come out recently about the NotPetya attack, which was a targeted attack on people or systems, organizations in Ukraine that, like these things tend to do, got loose. It went farther than the original attackers had intended. And Maersk, the big shipping company, got hit perhaps the hardest. And so I think it was 17 out of their 50-some ports around the world basically got shut down for a few days. And so we're talking about things that are perishable, food, and people who are relying on just-in-time deliveries for parts and things like that. So, but it could have been a lot worse. They handled it remarkably well. Part of it was throwing money at the problem, going to their partners and saying, our ships aren't sailing right now. Put your goods on a jumbo jet plane. We'll pay for it. Right? So huge losses there. You hope they're insured. I don't know that they were. I suspect they probably were. but their teams were able to gather people up. They literally going around and unplugging computers, saying to try to stop the spread of this, and then getting together, getting the smartest people in the company in one room, and just figuring out what happened. How are we going to fix it? Having good backups, those sorts of things. And then after the fact, saying, well, what can we learn from this? How can we do a better job to make sure that this doesn't happen again? They got hit really, really hard, but I think folks seem to agree that it could have been a lot worse if they hadn't been as well prepared as they were.
Yeah, that's good. I definitely think preparation makes a huge difference, but also that story about, helping the customer get what they need, even if it means using someone else's service,
right?
Even if it means using an airplane, that is just excellent customer service in a disaster event.
Absolutely. And that's, that's going to win you. You want to get lifetime loyalty from a customer. That's the way to do it, right? In a moment of crisis, to still be able to say to a customer, we've got this, we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure your needs are met. We'll figure it out later. Together, we'll collaborate and we'll figure out how to, the money, how to go forward from here. But right now, we're still talking to you, right? We haven't closed you off just because we are in a panic trying to figure out what's going on here. I guess panic's not the right word, but a vortex of chaos, right? We're still talking to you. We're still communicating with you. And so please try to have confidence that we're doing the best that we can. And hopefully when everything's done, they will remember and say, yeah, you had our back when the chips were down, when everything was tough. And I think that's how you get loyalty.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You do what you would want the company to do for you if you were their customer.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember once, this is a funny, and totally different scale of a problem, but there was a time a few years into our business with Pixel Workshop where we had sort of dipped our toes into the world of selling software. And this was high-end 3D rendering and animation packages. So, these were software packages that cost thousands of dollars. This was a business that we were in using this software, and so we thought, well, let's see what it would be like. Maybe we can sell this. And we had some situation where a supplier had been sold to someone else, and so we had sold software to one of our clients that at a discount that we could no longer get from our supplier. And this customer called us up and said, hey, I'm really concerned because we had agreed on X price, and I know that the price is, doubled or tripled or whatever since the new company bought that company. And so what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to give it to you for the price we agreed on. And he said, but you're going to lose money on that. I said, yeah. He said, but you're okay with that? I said, yeah, we made an agreement and I'm going to stand by it and I'll figure it out on my end. I'm not happy. Hopefully I'm going to be able to negotiate something with my supplier. But that's not your problem. You and I had a deal. We negotiated in good faith, and neither of us thought this was going to happen. But, I'm going to give it to you at that price. And the person on the other end of the phone was blown away. They were like, wow, I can't believe you're going to do that. You fool, But
you made a customer for life.
There you go. Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. And you know what? We went home at night. Did it hurt? Yeah. But I could sleep at night because I felt like we did the right thing. We made the right choices. We treated people with respect. And, could I have been richer or wealthier if I chose to go about doing business a different way? Yeah, probably. If I didn't spend as much time as both my wife and I spent a lot of time working with nonprofits, working in our community, volunteering time and services and all that. Could we have a bigger house or a nicer car or whatever? Yeah, probably. But you know what? That's fine. But I like being able to go to sleep at night and think that I've done my community good, I've done my clients good. Just having that feeling when you put your head down on the pillow at night that you're treating people fairly and hope that comes back to you. That's something I'm willing to go with. I'm willing to to not maybe have some of those creature comforts or a bigger bank account or whatever, a fancier car, to be able to feel good about the type of work that we're doing and the methods with which we're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I'm a firm believer in, what goes around comes around. And if you service others and help others, it's going to come right back around in one way or another.
Right. It really reminds me of something, one of the best pieces of business advice I ever got when we were just starting out. And I had a friend who was a banker. And he said to me, as part of doing business, you're probably going to at some point borrow money from a bank. And I said, yeah. I said, absolutely. We're in the process of doing that right now. He said, okay, there are going to be times when things they're not going to be going well. And you're going to wonder, how am I going to be able to pay my loans or my obligations, people I owe money to. He said, it's going to happen. Count on it. He said, and your first impulse is going to be to hunker down and not communicate with anyone because you're scared, you're embarrassed. He said, that's the opposite of what you need to do. He said, your banker does not want you to go out of business, right? Your banker wants you to stay in business. So they will do whatever they can to help keep you in business. And your banker has a big network of people that they work with. They want to send business your way because when they send business your way, you're more likely to be able to pay your loans back, right? You're going to become a better customer. You're going to put more money in the bank. So I took that advice to heart. And sure enough, when there were a couple of times over the years when things were really tough. Right after 9/11, we had some big government contracts that were just taken away because money was being diverted to starting up this new part of the government called Homeland Security. So we found ourselves, with challenging times. And I went with my tail between my legs and met with my banker, and we figured it out, right? And the banker said, "Thank you for coming to me." He said, times are tough right now. He said, I have a lot of people who are in similar situations, some who are worse, some who are better, but very few of them have come to me and said, let's try to work this out together. And so I think that kind of goodwill, you can't underestimate that kind of goodwill. And you've got nothing to lose, right? You got nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
So it was a really important lesson, and it's one I try to share whenever I have the opportunity to.
No, I think that's great. I think it's really scary to ask for help.
Yeah.
Or to let people know that you're not perfect and that you need some help in a certain area. But so many people are willing to help if you just ask.
That's right. And I mean, even day to day, it's funny, on our Hacking Humans podcast, which is all about social engineering, we talk about how to influence people. And I start off probably just about every customer service interaction with someone by saying, gosh, I really hope you can help me. Because people want to help, right? We all want to help each other. And so you start off those interactions on that kind of a foot. If I'm trying to get my, my Comcast bill adjusted or, whatever. Something's gone wrong. I'm trying to figure out why a medical bill hasn't been paid or something. If you start off the conversation rather than saying, hey, you jerks, you got this all wrong, right? And you start off by saying, hi, this is who I am. This is my situation. I really hope you can help me. Now we're talking. Now we're, you've, and there are people who disagree with that. I'm sure, there are people who are tough negotiators who probably do very well going in great guns. That's just not how I choose to do it. That's not my style of communication.
Yeah, I think the way I describe what you're talking about is using tactical empathy. You're putting it so that in a way that they can empathize with you versus putting up defenses against you.
I love that. I'm going to write that down. Tactical empathy.
Yeah, I actually got an episode coming up where I do a solo show about tactical empathy as just a way to motivate others and inspire others. And instead of coming out and telling people what they did wrong, let's think about how what they did affected, let them understand how what they did affected others in a way, and use their empathy kind of not against them, but for their better good.
That's great.
You know,
I have a friend who talks about the opposite of that. What does he call it? He calls it malicious. It's when you go along, when basically you do what your boss asks you to do without question. And it was like, malicious obedience. So if your boss comes to you and asks you to do something and you know it's the wrong thing to do, but you do it anyway because you have a bad relationship with your boss, you're in a bad work. It's this cycle that people get in when they have a bad work experience, when they have bad leadership. And rather than when their boss comes to them and asks them to do something they know is the wrong thing to do, rather than saying, wait a minute, wouldn't it be better if we did it this way? They follow along and do exactly what was asked and let the bad things happen. But then he refers to it as malicious obedience. And I think I like, it's a phrase I like, obviously something to be avoided, but tactical empathy, I like that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, feel free. So getting back to the cybersecurity thing, a lot of our audience are team leads, or some of them are CEOs of small development shops, or CIOs of companies. What are some things that we should be focusing on and thinking about when it comes to cybersecurity? Every day that maybe we are, maybe we aren't. I know it was just a couple of years ago that I really first started getting into, understanding cybersecurity. Even when I was, a development manager, I thought about it just enough to get the job done, and didn't dig in and really focus on it as much as I should. So what are some things that we should be doing, and probably and maybe we are, maybe we aren't doing?
Well, I think you start with the basics, and we talk about cyber hygiene. So making sure you're doing things like not reusing passwords. And the problem is everybody reuses passwords. We do it because passwords are hard to remember, and we're human, and so we want to make things as easy for ourselves as possible. So we reuse passwords. The best advice I can give for that is use a password manager. Let the password manager auto-generate strings of random numbers to be your passwords, and you'll never have to worry about reusing passwords again. I know that I was resistant to a password manager when I first started using one because I thought it was going to be a pain. I thought it was going to be an extra step. And let me tell you, I am converted. It is actually easier and way more secure. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, for anything that's important to you, use multi-factor authentication. Take that extra step. Having either using one of the apps, the Google Authenticator, or there's a bunch of those, or even having a text message sent to your phone. Yes, I know there are security concerns with that, but for most people, that's better than not having that at all. So those sorts of things, making sure everything's patched and up to date. Defense in depth, so that's not just having one layer of defense, not just having perimeter security, having multiple layers, making sure, for example, you have something looking at your systems to make sure there's no anomalous behavior going on within the systems, those sorts of things. Trying to think what else. Sorry.
What about staying aware of like current events and current things that are going on? How would you recommend people stay on top of some of the things that are out there?
Well, I mean, it's a challenge because the velocity at which everything is changing, in my mind, continues to accelerate, and the sophistication of what the attackers are coming at us with continues to grow. So, obviously, I'm going to plug news sources like the Cyberwire. I mean, it's really something that it was a need that we saw that needed to be filled, which is people don't have a lot of time. So, for example, our podcast, it's 20 minutes every day. And so what we hear back from a lot of our listeners is they'll listen on their way into work, or while they're out taking a walk, or while they're at the gym. And so they can go into their daily staff meeting and at least they won't be surprised by anything because they'll have heard of the thing. We don't have time to go into the deep technical depth about it. But when they go into the staff meeting and someone says, hey, did you hear about XYZ vulnerability that was exposed today? They can say, yeah, I heard about that. How does that affect us? So you're not caught off guard. There are So there's plenty of sources. There's the Cyberwire. There's the Internet Stormcast, which is another sort of headline news kind of thing. And then there's lots of good other podcasts out there if podcasts are your thing. If a lot of folks to follow on Twitter for InfoSec news, that sort of thing. But it is a challenge because it does take time to keep. Believe me, I know it takes time to keep on top of these things. Another point I want to make is that one thing that we've seen is as our technical abilities to block these attacks have gotten more sophisticated and have gotten better and have sort of, taken care of a lot of these things. For example, spam, right? We don't see a lot of spam in our inboxes anymore because our providers are doing a really great job of finding and corralling spam. Right. So what the bad guys are doing is they're relying on social engineering. They've shifted to things like phishing attacks, where they send you emails that look like they come from a legitimate company. You say, oh, what's this? It's a notification from UPS that I have a package. I didn't know that I, ordered a new pair of sneakers. Well, let me click through and see what this is all about. You click through and kaboom, they've got you. Because it looks like a legit, thing from UPS or someone else that you do business with. Very, very common. So the point being that as it's become more expensive to use the technical means to get you, that means that the social engineering attacks are comparatively less expensive, so the bad guys shift to using those sorts of attacks. So in terms of defending your business, it's important that you have training and awareness of the people all over your business, not just your technical people, everybody who handles, people in HR, people who are handling attachments and emails all the time. They need to be trained so they know what to look for, so they know the proper ways to kind of evaluate a piece of email to at least have a better chance of sensing whether or not something is up.
Yeah, I think training is very important. We just implemented KnowBe4 recently at our company.
Yeah.
And we actually I heard about them actually on the Cyberwire.
Oh, terrific!
As a matter of fact. Yeah. So take that back to them.
There you go. I will. I will send them this audio clip.
But we heard about it there and actually went with KnowBe4 and have been using that. We even even when we do our phishing test and people, we have, the standard amount of clickers that you would see. They get, additional training and additional things. And it's been, at first I thought it would be very resistant, that people would, hate it. But we actually had very positive responses and a lot more questions. And now we're seeing a lot more, things that are happening where people are actually reaching out to IT and asking, hey, are we supposed to get this email? And even when people got added into the quote clickers group, some of them responded back and said, hey, I just got an email about this training. I just want to make sure this is legit. So
right,
it's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, it really does work. And like I said, it speaks to that defense in depth. You can't just have one thing. You can't just put a moat around your business and hope that that's going to keep the bad guys out. You have to come at it from multiple directions.
Well, Dave, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you want to, any advice you want to give to tech leaders out there that we haven't already talked about?
No, I mean, I think you've really nailed it. I look at being a leader as being a collaborator, and it's my job to collaborate with my employees, to give them the tools they need to do the things that they want to do, to elevate them, to support them. And I try to be as positive as I can, supportive as I can. I don't have time or patience for negativity, for people putting each other down. I will not stand for a toxic work environment. It simply I cannot abide by that. So that's my style. I just think that's the way it has to be. And so I guess I'm fairly rigid when it comes to that. But it's something you have to be careful of, because you can get a single bad hire can come in, and I've had this happen. A single bad hire can come in, and they're poisoning the well. And I look at that as a failure on my part or my hiring team. Every time I've had to fire someone, I look at that as being a failure on my own part of not properly screening them, not properly doing the hiring process. And I take that personally and try to figure out how can I do a better job next time. So another little nugget of advice for our listeners.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that's one thing you need to do is to always look back on what you can do different. There's a book that I've talked about before on the show, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, where he talks about, you can blame other people, but when it comes down to it, you could have done something a little bit different. I think hiring is definitely that thing.
Yeah, like you said earlier, don't be afraid to be wrong. Being wrong, it can be empowering in that being wrong is an opportunity to learn. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more intellectually stimulating than learning. So, yeah, it can hurt your ego sometimes. You can be sad or embarrassed when you find out that you were just dead wrong about something. But take an appropriate amount of time to mourn that. And then when you're done, figure out, okay, what's next? How can I learn from this? And how can this experience make me even better than I was before?
Yep, that's great advice. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to link up your podcast and Twitter account and such in the show notes. Is there any other ways that people can get in touch with you?
No, the best way is just the cyberwire.com. That's where you can go and check out everything we do.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.